Andy Farrell has named his 42-man summer training squad ahead of this year's Rugby World Cup for Ireland. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to quickly go through the squad and let you know who's in it. Then we'll again quickly look at some of the players who have missed out, and finally then we'll go through the squad and let you know who I think is probably going to the World Cup, and then the other players in the squad, then what position I think they are in at the minute. So let's start with the squad with the forwards. So we have Weinbeard, Finlay Bealham, Tyke Byrne, Jack Conan, Gavin Coombs, Caelan Doris, Tyke Furlong, Cian Healy, Ian Henderson, Rob Herring, Ronan Kelleher, Dave Kilcoyne, Joe McCarthy, Peter O'Mahony, Tom O'Toole, Andrew Porter, Cian Prendergast, James Ryan, Dan Sheehan, Tom Stewart, Kieran Treadwell and Josh van der Fleer. In the backs then there are 20 players: Bundy Aki, Caelan Blade, Ross Byrne, Craig Casey, Jack Crowley, Keith Earls, Kieran Frawley, Jameson Gibson Park, Mac Hansen, Robbie Henshaw, Hugo Keenan, James Lowe, Stuart McCluskey, Conor Murray, Calvin Nash, Jimmy O'Brien, Jamie Osborne, Gary Ringrose, Jonathan Sexton and Jacob Stockdale. Okay, now players who maybe could feel a little bit unlucky missing out. Now this is not an exhaustive list, so I'm sure there's players that I'm going to miss as well. So if you feel I've left somebody out, maybe post it down in the comment. But some that I came up with was Jeremy Lockman and Roman Salanoa. I think both of those, possibly if there are injuries, could get a call up, but other than that, probably not going to go to the World Cup. But either of them coming into the squad, I think they'd be able to at least do a job. Then we have Dave Heffernan and Dermot Barron. Both had pretty decent seasons. Again, they possibly could come in and do a job, but I don't see them leaping over anyone who's in the squad at present. Then John Klein may be one of the most unlucky people not to make the squad. Guy has been in fantastic form, especially as Munster's form has improved towards the end of the season. He's played a big part in that as well, and I could definitely see him maybe coming into the squad, especially if there's an injury to Ian Henderson maybe, and they need someone in that kind of mold to come into the squad. I could definitely see him being probably the most likely of those outside the squad at the minute getting into the World Cup squad in the end. Next we have Niall Murray, had an absolutely fantastic season. Probably just a little bit down the pecking order at the minute though, given those that have been picked before him in the squad. Ross Maloney, again, kind of similar situation where, decent player, but hasn't really stood out enough above the other players to warrant selection. Next, then we have Nick Timoney. Probably suffered from Munster's dip in form during the season, and then kind of their season petering out there as well towards the end. If Ulster had gone on to a semi-final or a final the way that Munster did, maybe he would have been in with a shout, but really didn't get the chance to shine. Max Deegan, I felt, for Leinster, when they were picking towards the end of the season teams to kind of keep their first team fresh, I thought he was one of the real standouts for them, especially in maul defence. He was really good. Scott Penny has been excellent for Leinster as well. Himself and Deegan have been kind of the two standouts really in the Leinster back row all season, because they're the ones playing the games, whereas the established Irish internationals have been kind of rested on more occasions. John Hodnett for Munster, probably the form back row that hasn't made it into the squad. He's been excellent for Munster, and he's one, along with Klein, that I could see maybe making the squad eventually, depending on injuries. Rhys Ruddock, fantastic servant for both Ireland and Leinster. And then if he managed to get, into the squad at some point, I think he would definitely do a job. He's not someone that you probably would be wanting starting in like a quarterfinal or anything like that. But if you need bodies in there to play kind of the lesser teams of the pool, as it were. But I think at this stage, probably, his chance is gone. There's just too many ahead of him in the pecking order. Conor Oliver had another one with a decent season, but just too many standing out ahead of him, I think. Nathan Doak then for Ulster had a real battle all season with John Cooney for the starting 9 spot there in Ulster. He also has the added advantage of being able to kick goals as well. If he was in the squad and the 10 kind of has a few shaky kicks, he could take over. But I think, again, maybe just a few too many ahead of him in the pecking order. But injuries can, catapult someone from being 5th place to being in the squad very easily. Jack Carty, I think he got, a lot of the blame for the last World Cup, and probably a bit too much, and has been left out in the wilderness. But I think the semi-final of the URC against the Stormers kind of brought home as well maybe why he's not in the squad. The fact that he kicked 2 penalties that he was kicking into the corner dead, maybe is a bit of a reminder of the downside to, the immense talent that he does have ball in hand. He's probably one of the best passing 10s that we have in the country, but game management and being able to handle pressure maybe a little bit suspect for him. And although I think he did get too much of the blame for 2019, I think now that the Irish system have moved on from him, and kind of similar to Joey Carbery, I don't think anyone would have imagined at the start of the season that a fit Joey Carbery would not be in the World Cup squad. But again, he's not getting his game for Munster at the minute. You've got Crowley and Healy being preferred ahead of him there, even though Healy has switched allegiance to Scotland. And I think it's just a case with him that, again, I think Farrell has moved on from him being the solution, and maybe just not enough trust there for him. I think a lot of it is the thought of, if Sexton is unavailable for either the pool game against the Springboks or a possible quarterfinal against the All Blacks or France, would you want to have Joey Carbery as your starting 10? I think maybe last year the answer might have been yes, but this year the answer seems to be very much no. Next then we have Anton Frisch. He's another one who his form improved as Munster's form improved over the season as well, and his centre combination with Fekitoa there really did blossom all through the year. It's a pity really that Fekitoa is moving on, because those two look like they could be a very special centre combination for a long time if he'd stuck around. Frisch though again probably misses out just because there are too many established players in those centre berths, and then there are other players who offer more in terms of how many positions they can cover as well. So utility, maybe any other players in the squad ahead of him, but he's certainly one that we're going to see probably after the World Cup in an Irish jersey a lot more often. James Hume, I think another victim of like Ulster just losing form and then not being able to come through towards the end of the season. Definitely a talented player, but again, just too many above him in the pecking order. Next player then, I probably think Robert Barlacoon he's probably unlucky not to make the squad. And the reason for that is because I think if I was picking a back three player from Ulster, then I would pick him over Jacob Stockdale. I think Stockdale has that credit in the bank from past performances, but he hasn't really shown much this year for Ulster. He's kind of been in and out of the team with injury. He did find a little bit of form. He even got on got himself a try towards the end of the season. But I think in terms of danger, Balakoon just brings more of that than Stockdale does. Next, then we have Jordan Larmour, another very dangerous player, ball in hand, very similar to Balakoon in terms of, will back himself to beat players. Maybe doesn't have, he's pacey, maybe not as much out and out pace as Balakoon, but probably a bit more elusive in his running, his steps, and his ability just from a standing start to go around people. But I think all around game probably sees him miss out. Probably the fact that if he was going, he's going to be covering, wings and fullback, and maybe a fullback he has been looked a little bit suspect, and maybe that's why he's not in the squad. But I think himself and Balakoon, maybe with injuries could get into the training squad, but maybe not get to the World Cup. You might see them playing in some of the warm-up games. Then we have Mike Haley, been in great form for Munster, and again, I think it's just a case of a few too many people in the pecking order ahead of him. I think if he was a little bit younger, we might see him in and around the squad, just kind of for development, and maybe it would have taken more of a chance on him. But he's one that I think if he was playing fullback for Ireland, because Hugo Keane is unavailable or whatever, I'd be fairly happy for him to be there. Another player that I'd be fairly happy to see playing would be Mike Lowry, although I think not really in great form. He was one of the players that really did take a nosedive. I'm not sure whether he's injured now or not, because I haven't really seen him in and around the Ulster team. But definitely one that if he was in the squad, he's got a bit of excitement about him, but again, maybe a bit suspect in big games. So those are the players that I think are maybe a little bit unlucky to miss out. I'm sure there's plenty more. If you have any of those names, post them in the comments. I'd be glad to receive those comments, because it's very hard when you're going through stuff like this to remember everyone from over the season, and it's very easy to miss out someone who's played really well, but maybe just not at the forefront of your mind at the moment. But now let's go through the squad itself and talk about which players I think are almost certainly going to the World Cup, and what position the other players are in. So props, I think the 6 props that have been selected are probably all going to go to the World Cup. And Finlay Bealham was fantastic in the Six Nations, probably, I think, almost certainly our best prop in the Six Nations. Tadhg Furlong, he's definitely not at the level that he was last season. He seems to be struggling with injury. Even when he came back for Leinster, we're not seeing the impact that he normally has. He seems almost like a passenger in some games. And when he came back for Ireland in the Six Nations, kind of similar as well. He had a poor game and then a decent-ish game against England, but hasn't really hit the heights. But I think he definitely has enough in the bank to show that once he does get that match fitness, he's going to be able to deliver in the World Cup. Cian Healy, amazing servant for Ireland. The fact now that he can cover all 3 front rows positions means that he's on the plane, and he probably means he's going to be on the bench for probably every match that we play. Dave Kilcoyne, a decent player, has had a good season for Munster. He's not going to let the side down. He's probably not going to push for a starting berth, but you wouldn't be worried about him being on the bench either. Tom O'Toole, probably Ireland's second most impactful prop in the Six Nations. Like when he came on, the amount of go forward he got, like the amount of meters he made with ball in hand was absolutely crazy. I think after, what was it, 3 or 4 rounds, he was the second, something like the second highest carrying prop in the entire Six Nations, even though he didn't start a single game. So you can see the impact that he can have coming off the bench, and that certainly is something that you want to have in your locker as well, to have someone that come on like that and potentially change the game for you. Andrew Porter, again, kind of like Tyke Furlong, not really in great form this season, doing enough to keep a spot in the team, but what worries me is that probably the thing that he stands out for most this season, especially for Ireland, is giving away 6 penalties in one game. Didn't really have the impact that we've seen before in the loose or at the breakdown, not really winning too many turnovers or penalties for Ireland or Leinster, and probably, a player that probably needs someone, whether it's like a kick up the ass or an arm around the shoulder or wherever, is the best way to motivate him. But he needs someone to address that with him before the World Cup, because he's probably going to be he is going to be a starting loose head. But I don't feel like in the big games he's having the impact that we've seen him have in the past. On hookers then, Rob Herring, I think, he's a solid scrummager, decent in the line-out and good work around the park as well. And just all-around game, I think, gets him on the plane. Ronan Kelleher, only for Dan Sheehan is there, and only for the fact that he had those injuries as well, he probably would be the starting hooker for Ireland. I think we're very lucky to have, a player of his caliber as backup to Sheehan. And then when they switch around, it's the same thing with Sheehan as well, because, either of those starting, I don't think anyone minds which one it is. They're both really dynamic and have great impact all around. Dan Sheehan, though, I think is the man in possession of that number 2 jersey. Line out is very solid. Scrummaging could improve a little bit, but then that impact in terms of being able to get over the try line, and then his just out and out pace, and the fact that he has a step for a hooker as well, just puts him that little bit ahead of everyone else. Tom Stewart, the top try scorer in the URC, and actually set a record for most tries in the season as well. I think he's obviously the next man up, but somebody will have to get injured for him to be selected. I don't think he's going to get in there. If all 4 of those are fit, I don't think he makes the plane. But if he does make the plane, he probably is going to have an impact, because he's probably going to score a try or 2 at the World Cup. Second rows then, Tyke Byrne, he can play second row and back row, and his threat at the breakdown is amazing. Also, attacking mauls and defensive mauls, I think he just offers too much. He's fit, he's on the plane. I don't think anyone would argue with that. Ian Henderson, probably maybe not as locked in as he would have been maybe a year or 2 ago, but if he stays fit, I think he also makes a plane. Fitness, though, I think is going to be a big worry for him. Seems that he finds it hard to put a string of games together without picking up some kind of knock or injury. And if he goes to the World Cup, it might be a case where he's going to be missing either for the Scotland game or for the South Africa game. James Ryan, probably the form lock in Ireland this year. Just that, unseen work, hitting rucks, making his tackles, and then his work in kind of mauls as well. Line out solid too, and I think he's going to be a starter in the World Cup and definitely going to be on the plane. Then we have Joe McCarthy. I think like form for Leinster has been decent. I think Leinster had won one of the two trophies that they went for this year. Although team success shouldn't really impact a player's selection or not, but we all know that it does, and we all know that players in a winning team will look better than players that are in losing teams. But he's thereabouts. But at the moment, I don't think that he's going to make the squad. He probably look, benefiting from injuries or something like that, and maybe he'll make it in there. Kieran Treadwell is kind of in a similar position as well. I think in the end, in terms of if they're going to go for 4 out-and-out locks, it's probably going to be between Treadwell and Klein that get that last locking position, if that's what they're going to go for. And it depends then whether Ryan Baird is going to be considered a lock or a back row, really. But for both Treadwell and McCarthy, the two players that if they were in the squad, you wouldn't be unhappy, I think, with either of them being in there. You would feel kind of, that the player missed out was a little bit unfortunate, but I think is a bit of a coin toss between them. Back rows then, Ryan Baird, and the fact that he can cover second row and back row, I think, means that he's going to be on the plane. That pace that he has as well, for a player who can play second row, and just so athletic, and the ability as well and the instinct to go for those charge downs on kicks and stuff like that. I think all of that stands to him, and he's definitely going to be going there. Caelan Doris, probably the form back rower in Ireland this year, and his performances this year for Ireland and for Leinster speak for themselves. He's definitely going to be on the plane. Peter O'Mahony similarly for Munster. I think both Ireland and Munster are different teams when he's in there, because he has that ability that not many players have to be able to lift the performances of the players that are playing around them. And, also, I think one thing that he offers that not that many of the other Irish players offer as well is that threat in the line out to actually steal ball. He's so good at it. And yeah, I think if Peter O'Mahony is fit, he goes to the World Cup and probably is in the starting back row. Josh van der Fleer, last year's World Player of the Year, maybe not up to that standard this year, but we saw him begin to step up and throw into lineouts when Ireland had no hookers available against Scotland, and around the park, breakdown. He still offers a lot, and it's not a huge different form for him compared to, say, the likes of Porter and Furlong. I think he's thereabouts to the level that he was last year. It's just that last year he was playing, out of this world, but you could see him hitting that form again quite easily, especially if the back row that he's in are going well. In terms of back rows then, who at the moment are, not quite on the plane, Jack Conan. And Jack Conan kind of is, obviously he's an 8, but I think he's actually losing out to Peter O'Mahony, because I think Peter O'Mahony is your starting 6 for Ireland, which means that Doris, instead of playing at 6, is playing at 8, which then moves Conan down the pecking order. But he's shown that ability, carrying ability, his ability to offload out of tackles, his ability to defend mauls. He's got a lot to offer there, and he's another one that if he's on the plane, I think you're going to be fairly happy with him being there. Gavin Coombs, if there's anyone, if you want to get over the line from 1 meter out, you give this guy the ball, because he's got of any Irish player, and a lot of players in the world actually, he's got the best chance to get it over and get it down and ground it for that try. He's got such a great ability for it. We've seen him do it so many times this year for Munster. Teams are looking out for it. We saw it in kind of the semi-finals and the final of the URC as well, where teams were targeting him to kind of stop him getting over. But the fact that he offers that threat and he commits more defenders then just opens up space elsewhere. And, he's got such a great ability to be able to do that, that even if teams put the numbers in there, he still has the best chance to get over and score. All-around game is very good as well. He's got a good work rate. I think his work rate is probably picked up towards the end of the season compared to the start as well. So that's good to see. Keane Prendergast then been excellent for Connacht, especially towards the end of the season, where they made that run to the knockout stages of the URC. I think though Coombs and Conan probably offer a little bit more than him, and he's realistically in that kind of pack with the likes of Hodnett and Deegan really scrapping to get noticed there. The fact he's in the training squad obviously gives him a leg up on the others, but I'm not sure whether that's enough for him to actually go to the World Cup or not. Scrum halves then, we got Craig Casey, been excellent for Munster. Himself and Conor Murray have kind of swapped in and out of the team, and Casey at times, maybe some of his kicks have been a little bit suspect, but overall kind of solid, and I can see him definitely getting picked to go to the World Cup. Jameson Gibson-Park, he's the starting 9 for Ireland. I think that's going to remain the same. He's on the park. I think he gives Ireland that tempo that they need, and it's not just the speed of his pass, it's the speed with which he notices what's going on around him and makes his decision before he gets to the ball. We've seen sometimes Casey at times be a little bit ponderous, and Conor Murray as well. They have improved towards the end of the season with regards to that, but I think Jameson Gibson-Park, he just gives that extra tempo to the team, and if he's available, I think he starts. Conor Murray kind of faded at the start of the season. Casey was the man in possession for Munster, but Murray finished solidly, especially that final of the URC. I think that's what gets him on the plane is, he already has that experience in the bank with Ireland, and the fact that he's in decent form, I think, is enough to shade it for him ahead of Caelan Blade, who, decent season for him for Connacht. He offers, a lot of threat with ball in hand, and he's another one who kind of spots things quickly and is not afraid to kind of tap quickly or to put kicks through, but I think just the other three are maybe that little bit further ahead of him. If there is an injury though, I think he just automatically steps up and he will go to the World Cup. But in terms of, unless somebody has disastrous games in the warm-ups, I think he's probably outside the squad for the World Cup. Out halves then, we have Ross Byrne. We saw him have to step in with Johnny Sexton, out for the tail end of the season for Leinster. Some really good games, by him, especially that semi-final against Toulouse. The final against La Rochelle, probably some things he could have done better, and he's probably going to be himself and Crowley. I think the gap in terms of who is second choice behind Sexton has narrowed a lot since the knockout stages of the URC. Crowley, I think, was that semi-final, getting that drop goal under pressure, really going to stand to him. Played really well in the final 2, he offers that running threat that maybe, Byrne and Sexton don't offer as much. And he has that ability as well to, pull the strings. His kicking to the corner was really good as well. Like, where we talked about Jack Carty kicking dead, he kicked one from the halfway line, right spot on, right into the corner. It takes, some nerve to be able to do that. So no doubt if he has to step up and start, I think he could do it. And I think in terms of those three, we'll come on to Sexton now in a second, but in terms of those three, I'm not worried about either of them starting, having to start in, let's say, a quarterfinal if we get there. Whereas in the past, I think for a long time for Ireland, the starting 10 was the only one you wanted to see starting in a quarterfinal. Obviously, you do want the starting 10 to be the guy there, but the others, there was a lot of worries about them. Sexton then, he has this thing hanging over his head through his own fault with his behaviour towards Jaco Piper after the Heineken Cup final. But I think that, if he gets a suspension, it's going to be for the warm-up games. What I worry about with him is that the fact that he hasn't played in so long, they're probably going to try and play him into match fitness in the warm-up games, which means that Byrne and Crowley are probably going to get less game time than they should. So, maybe like if he misses one of the games through having a suspension could actually be a good thing for Ireland, meaning that Byrne and Crowley would see more game time than otherwise, because I do believe that if Sexton is available for those 3 warm-up games, he's probably going to start 2 of them, and I'm not sure that that's really going to benefit Ireland. I think you want to start Crowley in at least 1, and you want to start Byrne in 1 as well, and maybe, like, for me, 3 games, start 1 in each, but we'll see what happens with that. Next time we have Kieran Frawley. I think he's a bit behind the others in terms of certainly fly half or out half cover, but the fact that he offers cover for other areas might see him being included in the squad. But as an out-and-out 10, I think it would have to be an injury that would bump him up. Centres then, we have Bundy Aki. Bundy Aki is someone who, when he's missing, when he's out of the squad, people can question, like, is he that good? But then when you see him performing, you realise why he is a staple of the Irish squad. He gives so much, go forward with ball in hand. He's no problem with straightening the line. Obviously, passing could be better, but he's there to do a job for Ireland, and he does it really well. Robbie Henshaw, excellent player for Ireland and Leinster, and I think he's probably going to be the starting 12 in the Rugby World Cup. Aki will have something to say about that, but I think if both are fit, you pick Henshaw. Gary Ringrose has been in fantastic form this year, probably one of the form backs in Ireland. Sometimes on defence, he can have a game where he's absolutely stellar, and other times he gets a little bit caught out of position. But overall, I think he just offers too much for Ireland, and he's definitely going to be a starter. Stuart McCluskey then, I think if Ireland were picking 4 out-and-out centres, he goes to the Rugby World Cup. The way he filled in during the Six Nations really showed what he can offer. I think in terms of, he gives you that go forward, what that Bundy Aki does, but he also has that passing offloading game as well. But I think what's going to count against him is that he is a centre. He doesn't really cover other positions. And I think because of that, he's going to miss out unless there is an injury. Onto the back 3 then. Mac Hansen, he's just so solid. And dangerous as well in possession and really good in the air. All of that, I think, means he goes. Hugo Keenan, he's the man in possession of the 15 jersey, and that's not going to change before the Rugby World Cup. He's definitely going. James Lowe, again, man in possession of the 11, and I think his boot is something that Leinster and Ireland really miss when he's not there. Now, in fairness for Leinster, when he did come back, he had some wayward kicks, but overall, I think just the length that he has on his kicks, and also just his willingness to get involved and to go looking for work and not just stay on his wing. I think he's going to be a starter, and he's definitely on the plane. The other then, back three or backs really in the squad. So you got Keith Earls, great servant for Ireland. I think he's someone that you wouldn't worry about him starting for the team or even being on the bench. Probably covering wing. You don't really want to see him covering fullback, even if he could. But if he is covering fullback, that it's kind of a cobbled together team. But I think he's probably going to miss out because there are other players who are in just in better form than him at the minute, who may pick those spots for. Instead, he can cover centres as well, which is a nice string to his bow. But unfortunately, a lot of the players that he is competing against can do that as well. Calvin Nash, probably the form winger in Ireland at the minute, and that could be one of the reasons why he, possibly is going to get picked maybe ahead of Earls. But again, there are other players who are in that mix as well. But I think, he's so dangerous with the ball in hand. He's good under the high ball as well, which I think you have to be if you're playing on the wing these days in Test rugby. And, probably pretty high up there in the pecking order for, I think there's probably two back spots that have, of the players I've picked 12. I think probably 14 are going to go to the World Cup. He might be one of those two. Next, then we have Jimmy O'Brien, who I think is probably is going to go. I didn't put him in the green because there are other players, the likes of Nash, who are competing for that spot. But I think Jimmy O'Brien, he just has so much utility, being able to cover so many positions, and do a decent job in them as well. And I think that's probably will get him on the plane eventually, but I don't think he's there just yet. But I think through the warm-up games, we'll see that he is one of the ones that will kind of prove his worth, given I think he's going to move around due to injuries across the back line. Jamie Osborne, in fantastic form this season, being in the squad, it does give him the chance to go. But I think that, again, he's probably behind O'Brien in terms of pecking order, and he's probably battling out with the likes of Nash and Earls for maybe that second spot there in the kind of utility backs, as it were. Last then is Jacob Stockdale. I think he's someone who really is in the squad on reputation rather than form. His form has improved towards the end of the season, but he's definitely not the form back three, even in the Ulster team. As I said, I think Balakoon probably offers more threat than him at the minute, but he has that special thing about him, not just the ability to score tries, but the ability to create something out of nothing, and that ability as well, that in contact, getting over the line, he's more likely to, if it's the last discharge tackle coming in, he's more likely to be the one to score compared to maybe the likes of Larmour and Balakoon. But I think for me, I wouldn't pick him for the Rugby World Cup. I'm very happy, though, to be proved wrong, for him to go and be a match winner for us. But I think everyone that's in the squad is on merit. The people who I mentioned as possibles could very easily get into that World Cup and do a decent job as well. And again, there's probably players that I missed out, but those are my thoughts on the squad. Feel free to let me know yours as well. Who do you think is definitely on the plane? Who do you think has work to do as well?